Welcome to my first Kings of War battle report. So tonight, my friend Tom and I got together for our first game of Kings of War after the big switch from Fantasy to try out our different armies. He brought his Ogres. He played Ogres for a long time in Warhammer Fantasy, and I brought my Dwarves. You're going to see some gray plastic out there for the first time for me in a long time, which is a little bit embarrassing, but I don't have any kind of time to paint right now. But I took a couple of shots of our deployment after my first round of movement. I went first. You'll see on the far right, I've got some Berserker Brock Riders over there on the right with the Berserker Lord. And it looks like I've got my Shieldbreaker Horde. I got a Steel Behemoth over there, that's that big dragon, flanked by a couple of organ guns, really kind of poorly deployed. I've got a 10-man unit of Quarrelers, and then a 20-man unit of Ironclad, another 10-man unit of crossbows, and then to the left there, sort of cut off, you'll see another group of shield breakers. Those are just great weapon guys. And then to the left of them, on the far extreme left, I've got myself another unit of the Ironclad, just two 20-man units of shield guys. We got a couple of standard bearers out there just to offer rerolls. You'll see one guy up there on the hill, and then a guy between the three units in the center. I've got a Warsmith by the two organ guns. You can't see him; he's in the shadow of the dragon. And that's about it. And there's my left-hand side. For him, you see there on the left, you see those chariots. And then you see he's got some of the lead belcher equivalent, I forget what they're called, the guys who shoot the breath weapon. He's got two units of those guys, he's got some great weapon guys, and he's got a unit of hunters in the center there. And he's got a unit of shields next to them, to their left. Over on this side, this must be his movement after the first turn. Yeah, this is his movement. So he's got a giant, he's also got his mammoth, and he's got a unit of just regular warriors with shields and a commander over there to help him out. And they all kind of faced off against my berserkers and my Berserker Brock Lord, there on the left, who's got the +2 sword, the Blade of Beast Slaying. So this is after his first turn. He sort of advanced everything up pretty carefully, staying out of my charge range and setting up his big charge, hopefully. That's the dead center. On my left, his right, he started bringing his chariots up to face off against my great weapons and against my shield breakers and against my ironclad. And that's just another picture of the right-hand side for some reason. And this looks like a deployment picture before deployment. So hey, let's go back in time. Look, this is my deployment in the center. And over on the left. And his deployment. Weird. I'm not sure why the pictures have gone this way. Anyway, get through these. Right then. So bottom or top of turn 2, I decided to go ahead and get things rolling. And I charged my Berserker Brock Riders into his Ogres, and my Lord into his Giant. And I did well, but not well enough. So my Lord bounced off his Giant, did 6 wounds, and then my Berserker Brock Riders did 8 wounds on those guys, but failed to break them, which is really problematic, as you can see. And there's my Berserker Brock Lord, beating up a Giant. And here's his counter charge, everything into the front, and then the big Giant, or the big Mammoth to the flank. It's a really stupid move on my part. My Berserker Brock Riders are basically wasted on the game. His chariots went into my Shieldbreaker Horde, which was kind of a nice break. He could have gone into the Ironclad if he wanted to. I would have flanked him with the Shield Breakers anyway, but he might have broken the Ironclad since I didn't have a reroll nearby. Here's the Berserker Brock Riders again, and that's what happened to them at the end of that combat. Pretty simple, they got wiped out. My Berserker Brock Rider Lord got charged with a Giant as well, but he survived that. Took a few wounds, but that was it. Up in the middle, he does a couple of charges as well. He goes into my other Ironclad unit with his Lead Belcher guys. And I take some wounds from the chariots. On my turn, I go ahead and countercharge and flank into the chariots. Charge those Lead Belchers with the Ironclad, just to keep him busy. And then I front and flank into his nasty little group of warriors there, or his... I must have missed that charge earlier. In the previous turn, he charged my Shieldbreaker Horde with his group of hunters and did some wounds on them. Actually put a significant amount of wounds on them, but they survived, and so I countercharged in their front and flank. And then over on the right-hand side, my Berserker Brock Lord once again into the Giant. My Steel Behemoth, you see, moves up alongside that building, getting in range of those Ogres that got hurt by the Berserker Brock Riders. I open fire on them during my shooting phase, and they go away. Between the breath weapon and the double shot, they go away, and then if you look in close combat, you'll see my Berserker Brock Lord just smash that giant to pieces with his Beast Slayer sword. Can't recommend it enough. He's pretty awesome with it. Over here, we do those guys in at the end of combat, so they pop. Over here, those guys hold despite taking a bunch of wounds. And over here, these guys managed to hold on Snake Eyes. I'm not sure when that was. That might be a little bit out of order. Right, his group of great weapons had gone into, on his turn, had gone into my little 10-man unit of crossbow dwarves, and they got smashed to pieces, but they held on Snake Eyes. Over here, on his turn, his hero there charged the flank of my Shieldbreaker Horde, did enough wounds to break it and run it down. That sucked. And over here, my heroic Standard Bearer charged some Lead Belchers and actually held on to those guys for like 2-3 turns. Over here, this must be a turn or two later, his Mammoth charged my Berserker Brock Lord, who survived, countercharged, and killed it in the following turn. So he's now murdered 2 monsters. He's definitely made his points back. And over here, those guys flank and wipe out the chariots. In the center, we get some more scrum. You see those big guys that bounced off the crossbows. They get double charged in the front. My Ironclad charged the front of those Lead Belchers. Shooters, I forget what they're called. Blasters, I forget what they're called. Anyway. His Ogre heroes had about enough of that Berserker Brock Lord. Charges in, kills him. Over here, my Standard Bearer gets beaten to crap, but once again holds on double ones. Pretty hilarious, twice this game. I had wavered his Lead Belcher, so they didn't get to charge in, but his hero comes in, and Ogre heroes are nasty in the flank. They're not individuals, so they hit pretty hard. He gets 10 attacks, hitting on 3s, crushing strength 2 or 3. I mean, it's pretty bad, but he flanks them. I think they managed to hold on one more turn. Over here, I'm getting lined up, ready to flank those guys. Then my Steel Behemoth comes in on the flank on the following turn against these Ogres that I'd wavered in the previous turn, and just destroys them. That thing is amazing once it gets to a flank. I mean, it doesn't move for crap. It moves at a 4, so getting it into position to charge is really tricky, but once it gets there, whew. So that's me charging into those Ogres again, Ogre shooters again. And my brave little other Standard Bearer charging into their flank, because why not? And there's the fight. I managed to destroy it. Oh, in the previous slide, I managed to destroy his great weapon Ogres with my Behemoth and all the attacks coming from the Horde. We just basically, once the Behemoth attacked, he basically just had me roll. And there's the Behemoth after chomping down some Ogres. And here's him. He manages to break those Ironclad, finally in combat. And here's my guys lined up. And again, this picture. There we go. So now we do some movement. I get some guys out of the way. I have my Steel Behemoth flanks that other unit and pops it. And then my Ironclad go into the other Lead Belchers and pop them eventually. Yep, there they are. And they fight. And here we go. These guys go into his hero and kill it. And that's about it. Just showing some more of these other pictures here. Yeah, and that's about it. In the lower right, the only other thing that happened is his hero that killed my Berserker Brock Lord came down, picked up one of the organ guns. The other organ gun shot him off the board, though, in addition to the pistol shots from the Master Engineer. So, victory for the Dwarves. We were both sort of experimenting with the game. We're both pretty new to it, so I'm sure we made a bunch of mistakes. Because Kings of War is pretty awesome, it's pretty easy to understand the rules, and we didn't have any trouble playing correctly, I don't think. It's pretty much move, get into position, and go. I think my build was, useful. It, again, just units that I could put on the table. I tried to be as balanced as I could. The ironclad units were they were very useful. They picked up their points, they held their points until the end, although they did both get killed, or one of them did get killed. The other one managed to kill both the chariots and a unit of the lead belcher, so he was definitely worth his while. And the ones that did get killed were worth the sacrifice because they lasted for several turns and kept some things busy while the rest of my army did the job. The steel behemoth, man, when that thing gets into combat, it's amazing, but it's so hard to get it into combat. I'm used to, you get used to Warhammer where you can sort of move and shift your facing and then move a little bit more, and it's harder in Kings of War, so you got to kind of sort of shift before you move, or move and then shift a little bit, and you don't get to move very far if you only move 4, so got to be really careful with him. His breath weapon 10 is nice, but it's not enough to pressure somebody into charging him for the most part, so you really got to put him in a good place and deploy him well. Just using standard bearers was enough leadership for me for now. I imagine if people wanted to pick them apart, they probably could. If they wanted to cast lightning bolts and stuff at them, that might be a problem because they've only got a little bit of nerve, but it was a pretty good leadership bubble, having just a couple of standard bearers out there, and then having the Berserker Brock Lord minding the Berserker Brocks. The poor Brocks, boy, that was stupid. Just don't assume that you're going to break something because you get a lot of attacks and you've got Crushing Strength 1, which I put on them with the potion, and then Thunderous Charge. It's not enough, and even with a nerve of like 23, they still get shattered if they get flanked by a big mammoth and take some ogres to the front. So mental note for next time, be more careful and combo them in. The Berserker Brock Lord, however, was definitely the star of the show. He had great success just killing monsters over on the right-hand side, so he did exactly what I needed him to do. He was frustrating a little bit for my opponent, I think, because he was surprised at how effective he was. I think next time I'm not going to get away with being able to put him into a couple of monsters. I think he's going to go ahead and shoot that guy off the board, or do something more to neutralize him because he's pretty dangerous. But I think I'll keep him in the list just because he is so useful. So that is the end of my first Kings of War battle report. We had a good time. Game didn't take all that long, even though we were both sort of like, how does this work? I've played a few games of Kings of War previous to this, but he hadn't played any, and it was nice to get a refresher with the books in our hand. So I hope you enjoyed the report, and hopefully there'll be many more.